I didn't mean to trespass on your land.
You rode right through it.
We need water. Our herd is dying.
It's a dry season for everyone.
The cowboy thought he was buying nothing more than a lonely, forgotten ranch in the middle of nowhere. But on his very first night, he discovered someone was already living there, a silent Apache woman with eyes full of warning. The townspeople called her dangerous, and whispered about a secret buried beneath the land. But when armed men suddenly arrived at the ranch after dark, the cowboy realized she wasn't protecting a secret from him. She was protecting him from it. Ethan Walker had spent most of his life moving across the Western Territories with no place to truly call home. He worked wherever he could find honest pay. Some months he repaired fences. Other months he broke horses or drove cattle across dry land that seemed to stretch forever. He had slept under wagons, beside rivers, and sometimes in empty barns during hard winters. The older he became, the more he wanted something simple. A quiet piece of land. A roof that belonged to him. A reason to stop wandering. That was why the cheap ranch outside the town of Red Mesa caught his attention. The old property sat far from the main road near rocky hills and narrow desert canyons. Most people avoided the area. The ranch had been abandoned for months after the previous owner disappeared without explanation. Some claimed he had run away during the night. Others believed something worse had happened. Inside the saloon, Ethan listened quietly while the bartender cleaned dusty glasses behind the counter. "You thinking about buying that ranch?" the bartender asked. Ethan nodded once. The man gave a slow shake of his head. "Folks around here stay away from that place for a reason." "What reason?" The bartender leaned closer. "Men have gone looking for something out there. Most come back empty-handed. Some never come back at all." Ethan had heard stories like that before. Small towns always carried rumors like dry leaves in the wind. Usually the truth was far less dramatic. "How much trouble can one empty ranch really cause?" Ethan asked. The bartender did not smile. "Enough that nobody else wants it." That answer should have made Ethan walk away. Instead, it pushed him closer to buying the land. He had little money left and not many choices. By sunrise the next morning, the papers were signed. The ride to the ranch took nearly half a day. The farther Ethan traveled from town, the quieter the desert became. The air felt heavy and still. Even his horse seemed uneasy as they approached the property. When the ranch house finally appeared in the distance, Ethan noticed something strange right away. The front gate stood open. A small trail of smoke drifted into the sky from behind the barn. Someone was there. Ethan slowly guided his horse forward while resting one hand near the revolver at his side. The wooden porch creaked softly in the wind. Dust moved across the yard in thin waves. Then he saw her. A woman stood beside the barn watching him in complete silence. She wore dark clothing faded by sun and dust. Long black hair rested over her shoulders, moving gently with the desert wind. Her face remained calm, though her eyes studied him carefully as if measuring the kind of man he was. Ethan stopped several feet away. "I bought this ranch," he said. The woman showed no surprise. "You should leave," she replied quietly. Ethan frowned. "I paid for this land." "You paid for danger." Her voice carried no fear, only certainty. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. Instead of answering, she turned and walked behind the barn. Ethan climbed down from his horse and followed, but when he reached the other side, she was gone. That night, Ethan stayed inside the old ranch house alone. The wooden walls groaned under the desert wind while shadows moved across the floor beside the lantern light. Sleep came slowly. Near midnight, the sound of horses pulled him awake. Several riders approached the ranch. Ethan moved quietly toward the window and looked outside. 3 armed men circled the property carrying lanterns. "Check the barn," one of them said. Ethan reached for his rifle. Then suddenly a sharp sound cut through the darkness. An arrow flew from somewhere near the fence and shattered one of the lanterns. The horses panicked instantly. Gunshots exploded into the night. The riders shouted in confusion while another arrow struck the dirt beside them. Within seconds, the men turned their horses and rode away into the darkness. Ethan rushed outside with his rifle raised. Near the edge of the yard stood the same woman from earlier. She lowered her bow slowly. "I warned you," she said. The sun had barely risen when Ethan stepped outside the ranch house the next morning. Cold desert air brushed against his face as he studied the fresh tracks left behind by the riders. Their horses had circled the property several times before finally leaving sometime before dawn. Whoever those men were, they planned to return. Ethan spent the morning repairing broken fence posts near the corral, though his attention stayed fixed on the hills surrounding the ranch. The silence out there no longer felt peaceful. It felt watchful. Around midday he heard soft footsteps behind him. The woman had returned. She carried 2 metal buckets filled with water from a nearby stream. Without speaking, she walked toward the barn as if she belonged there. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead and faced her. "You saved my life last night," he said. The woman placed the buckets down carefully. "You were in danger before you arrived. That still does not explain who those men were." She looked toward the distant canyon. "Men searching for something they will never stop hunting." Ethan crossed his arms. "What exactly is hidden out here?" For a moment she remained silent. Then she finally spoke. "My name is Tala." The name stayed in Ethan's mind longer than he expected. "Tala," he repeated. "Do you live here?" "Sometimes." "That is not much of an answer." A faint trace of amusement touched her face for the first time. "You ask many questions for a man who ignored every warning in town." Ethan could not argue with that. Tala walked slowly toward the edge of the property where the desert opened toward narrow stone canyons. "My family once lived in these hills," she said quietly. "Long before this ranch existed." Ethan listened carefully. Years ago, men came searching for gold hidden somewhere near this land. Soldiers, outlaws, ranchers. Some killed each other trying to find it. And now those riders think it is here? Ethan asked. Tala nodded once. People believe something valuable was hidden beneath this ranch many years ago. Ethan let out a soft breath. "So all this trouble is about buried gold. You think greed is a small thing?" Tala asked. Her eyes locked onto his. "It destroys everything around it." Later that afternoon, Ethan rode into Red Mesa for supplies. The moment he entered the saloon, conversations faded into silence. Several people glanced toward him with nervous curiosity. An older rancher sitting near the window motioned him closer. "You stayed the night out there?" the man asked quietly. "I did." The rancher leaned forward. "Then you met the Apache woman?" Ethan nodded carefully. The older man lowered his voice even further. "She has protected that land for years." "Protected it from who?" Before the rancher could answer, the saloon doors opened. A tall man stepped inside wearing a sheriff's badge across his chest. Sheriff Boone. The room became still. Boone walked directly toward Ethan with slow measured steps. His face carried the hard expression of a man used to getting what he wanted. "You bought Walker Ranch," Boone said. "That is right." The sheriff studied him for several long seconds. "You should sell it while you still can." Ethan met his stare calmly. "Why does everyone care so much about that land?" Boone gave a thin smile that never reached his eyes. "Because men who stay there usually disappear." That evening, Ethan returned to the ranch beneath a sky turning dark with clouds. Tala stood near the fence waiting for him as if she already knew what had happened in town. "You spoke with Boone," she said. Ethan climbed down from his horse slowly. "You know him?" Tala's expression hardened. "He is one of the men searching for the gold." Ethan felt a chill move through him. Then Tala spoke the words that changed everything. "My grandfather hid it many years ago." Ethan barely slept that night. Tala's words repeated in his mind over and over. "My grandfather hid it many years ago." The ranch no longer felt like a simple piece of land. It felt like the center of something dangerous that had been waiting quietly beneath the surface for years. Before sunrise, Ethan stepped outside with a rifle in his hands. The desert air carried the scent of dust and dry grass. At first everything seemed calm. Then he noticed smoke rising in the distance. Riders. Coming fast. "Tala," he called. She appeared from behind the barn almost instantly, already holding her bow. "There are too many," she said after one quick glance toward the hills. Within minutes, the riders surrounded the ranch. Sheriff Boone rode at the front with 5 armed men beside him. Their horses moved slowly across the yard while dust swirled around them. Boone looked up at Ethan standing on the porch. "You should have listened to me in town," the sheriff said calmly. Ethan tightened his grip on the rifle. "You planning to kill me over old stories and buried gold?" Boone smiled faintly. "This stopped being about stories a long time ago." One of the riders climbed down and tossed a lantern toward the barn. Glass shattered. Flames spread instantly across the dry wood. Ethan fired without hesitation. The bullet struck the dirt beside the rider's boots, forcing him backward. Gunfire exploded across the ranch. Wood splintered around the porch while horses screamed in panic. Tala moved through the smoke with frightening speed. One arrow struck a rider in the shoulder and knocked him from his horse. Another arrow buried itself into a lantern hanging from the saddle of a second man, sending fire across the ground. "Get inside," Ethan shouted. But Tala shook her head. "They want the ranch," she said. "Not us." Smoke rolled across the yard as flames climbed higher along the barn walls. Boone fired toward Ethan from behind the water trough. "You cannot protect her forever," the sheriff yelled. Ethan fired back and shattered the wood beside Boone's head. Tala grabbed Ethan's arm suddenly. "There is another way out." Without wasting another second, they ran toward the rear of the property where a narrow trail disappeared into the canyon hills. Bullets struck the dirt behind them while Boone's men shouted in pursuit. Ethan and Tala mounted his horse together and rode hard into the desert. The burning ranch slowly disappeared behind them. Hours later they reached a hidden canyon far from the main trails. Tall stone walls blocked the wind, and a narrow stream flowed quietly between the rocks. Ethan climbed down from the horse, exhausted. "You knew this place was here?" Tala nodded. "My family used these canyons long before settlers arrived." For the first time since meeting her, Ethan noticed how tired she looked. Dust covered her face and smoke clung to her clothes. "They destroyed the ranch for nothing," Ethan said. Tala stared silently at the canyon walls. "No," she replied softly. "They destroyed it because they are afraid." "Afraid of what?" "The truth." That evening they rested inside a small cave hidden behind thick stone walls. A fire burned quietly near the entrance while darkness settled across the canyon. For a long time neither of them spoke. Then Tala finally broke the silence. "My grandfather hid more than gold." Ethan looked up at her. "What do you mean?" She hesitated before answering. There were documents inside the strongbox. Papers proving powerful men stole land from Apache families many years ago. Ethan slowly understood. The gold had only been part of the secret. Boone and the others were protecting something far bigger than stolen money. "They cannot allow those papers to be found," Tala said quietly. Ethan stared into the fire. "So what happens now?" Tala met his eyes across the flames. "We reach the strongbox before Boone does." Outside the cave, cold wind moved through the canyon while distant thunder rolled across the desert sky. And somewhere beyond the hills, Sheriff Boone and his men were still hunting them. Rain fell across the desert through most of the night. Inside the cave, Ethan sat awake beside the fire while Tala studied an old path drawn into the dirt with a stick. The narrow canyon passages twisted through the hills like a maze. Only someone who knew the land well could move through them without getting lost. "We leave before sunrise," Tala said quietly. Ethan nodded. "If Boone finds that strongbox first, those papers disappear forever." By morning the storm had passed, leaving the desert cold and silent. Ethan and Tala traveled deeper into the canyon on foot, leading the horse carefully through the rocky paths. Hours later they reached a narrow waterfall hidden between tall cliffs. At first Ethan saw nothing unusual. Then Tala stepped through the falling water. A cave waited behind it. Inside, the air felt cool and still. Faded markings covered the stone walls, nearly erased by time. Tala moved toward a corner of the cave and knelt beside a group of loose rocks. "This is where my grandfather hid it," she whispered. Together they pulled the stones away. Beneath them rested an old wooden strongbox wrapped in rusted chains. Ethan stared at it silently. After all the violence, all the deaths, and all the years of fear, the secret was finally in front of them. Tala opened the box slowly. Inside sat several gold bars darkened by age. But beneath the gold rested a bundle of old papers tied carefully with cloth. Tala lifted them gently with shaking hands. "These are the records," she said softly. Before Ethan could answer, the sound of boots echoed through the cave. Sheriff Boone stepped from the shadows with 2 armed men behind him. "I was hoping you would lead me here," Boone said. Ethan instantly moved in front of Tala. Boone raised his revolver. "Move away from the box." Tala held the papers tightly against her chest. "You murdered people for this," she said. Boone gave a cold smile. "People kill for money every day. But power is worth far more." One of Boone's men suddenly grabbed a gold bar from the chest. The second man pointed his rifle toward Boone himself. For one dangerous second, nobody moved. Then greed shattered what little trust remained between them. Gunfire exploded inside the cave. One outlaw fell instantly. The second fired wildly while Boone dove behind the rocks. Ethan tackled the armed man before he could shoot Tala. Both men crashed hard against the cave wall as bullets struck the stone around them. Tala rushed toward the cave entrance, clutching the papers. Boone saw her escape and fired. The bullet struck the rock beside her head. Ethan slammed his fist into Boone's jaw and sent the sheriff stumbling backward near the edge of the waterfall. "You should have stayed out of this," Boone snarled. Ethan stood between Boone and Tala. "No," he said firmly. "You should have." Boone lunged forward with a knife in his hand. But the wet rocks beneath his boots suddenly gave way. The sheriff lost his footing and disappeared over the cliff beside the waterfall. His scream vanished into the roaring river below. Then silence returned to the canyon. For several moments, neither Ethan nor Tala spoke. The roar of the river echoed through the canyon while Boone disappeared beneath the rushing water far below. The fight was finally over. Ethan turned toward Tala. "You all right?" She nodded slowly, still holding the old papers against her chest. Together they left the cave before Boone's remaining men could return. By nightfall they reached the ranch again. What remained of it stood dark and broken beneath the evening sky. Part of the barn had burned to the ground. Fence posts leaned sideways across the property, and ash still covered parts of the yard. Yet despite the damage, the house still stood. Tala looked across the land quietly. "For years this place carried nothing except fear," she said. Ethan glanced at her. "That can change." Over the following weeks, news spread through Red Mesa about Sheriff Boone's crimes. The stolen land records hidden inside the strongbox exposed years of corruption involving powerful men across the territory. For the first time, many families learned the truth about how their land had been taken from them. Some townspeople still looked at Tala with suspicion, but others slowly began treating her with respect. The fear surrounding the ranch finally started to fade. Ethan stayed. Together, he and Tala rebuilt the barn, repaired fences, and brought cattle back onto the property. What once felt empty slowly became a home. One evening, they stood beside the corral watching the desert sunset turn the hills gold. "You could still leave," Tala said softly. Ethan smiled faintly. "I spent half my life searching for a place worth staying." He looked at her. "I think I finally found it." For the first time in many years, the ranch no longer belonged to secrets, violence, or greed. It belonged to hope. Some people spend their whole lives searching for treasure, only to lose themselves along the way. But Ethan discovered something far more valuable than gold hidden beneath that lonely ranch. He found truth, trust, and a reason to stop running from the past. And Tala, who spent years protecting dangerous secrets alone, finally found someone willing to stand beside her instead of against her. In the end, the greatest treasure was never buried in the canyon. It was the life they built together after the fear was gone. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional Western stories filled with mystery, courage, and unforgettable characters. And tell us in the comments, would you risk everything to protect the truth, even if powerful people wanted it buried forever?